Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to Gills in the Blood TV. First of all, hope you're all keeping well. I've just noticed that we are 6 days away from being 4 months since the channel was able to bring you any live football. March the 7th, that 2-2 draw at the Stadium of Light seems like a million years ago now, unfortunately. And since then, we've all had to change the way we live. But we are now into July. Players are free agents. Retained release lists have been published up and down the land for those clubs that can do so. Obviously, the Championship are still playing, restarted a couple of weeks ago. League Two has just finished. Congratulations to everybody connected with Northampton Town who've been promoted back into League One. Former winger Mark Marshall, another promotion on the CV. See that he set up the third goal in their thumping 4-0 win over Exeter at Wembley on Monday evening. And just a quick word on the Exeter fans, you have to feel sorry for them. What's that now? 3 defeats at Wembley in the last 4 or 5 seasons. And I think in the other season they missed out in the playoffs by a point. So tough going for their fans, but I'm sure they'll be back next season having another go, whenever that is. Obviously, League One playoffs start tomorrow night. Sorry, Friday night. So I'll be watching them keenly. But the purpose of today's video is to have a look at potential signings. Now, obviously, before I start, I want to make it clear that I have no inside knowledge. I have no idea of what the budget could be next season. Obviously, it's going to be less, I'd imagine, up and down the country for various clubs because of the fact that, especially in League One and League Two, there's been no income for 3 months or more. Clubs that rely on gate receipts as a large chunk of their money that comes through the door, obviously on a Saturday or a Tuesday. But it's just nice to be talking about football and potential signings. So please don't shout at me and say, oh, he's well out of our league or we can't afford him. I understand that. And I've tried to be as realistic as possible. So what I'll do is I'll start in each position, go through each player. Right, so section 1 is right backs. And you may be wondering why I've not suggested any goalkeepers. I haven't, because I think that we have 2 in Jack Bonham and Joe Walsh who will predominantly be the first 2 keepers moving forward. It may be that we bring in someone if one of them picks up an injury or gets suspended. But for now, I'm leaving goalkeepers alone. I think we have Jack Bonham established number 1, Joe Walsh highly rated as our number 2. So, right backs, number 1. And I know Steve Evans said we was going to be more streamlined, hungrier, younger this season. So the first one probably goes slightly against the grain, but at the same time, my thinking is we need experience within the dressing room as well. Barry Fuller's been told he can look for another club. Mark Byrne is only coming back for pre-season, so may not be there. Max Amar, dare I say it, may be leaving. It looks like a move to Bristol Rovers is imminent, but fingers crossed that it falls through or it's all just transfer rumours and talk and stuff like that. But it may be that we're in a position where we have to sell Jack Tucker and or Connor Ogilvie to move forward as we'd like. But my first choice at right back is a 31-year-old released by Lincoln City, and that is Neil Erdley. Played 39 times in 2019-20 before the curtailment of the season and kept 11 clean sheets for the Imps, which I think is a decent return on a side that finished below us in the table. Has over 350 career appearances. Can name Blackpool, Birmingham and Lincoln amongst the clubs that he's played predominantly for. Was reading on Twitter fan sort of tributes to him after he'd been released by Lincoln, and seems like a top player, a top pro, and just would be one that I think would be really good around the dressing room. You think, yes, he's 31, he's 4 years younger than Barry Fuller, who was our first choice right back effectively last season. So that's one potentially I would look at. Second one is from League Two, released by Mansfield, 25-year-old Hayden White. Was signed by Steve Evans in his time in charge at Mansfield, and he's made 77 appearances in 3 years with the Stags. Just think it's one that is at a good age. We're probably going to need 2 right backs with Barry Fuller and Lee Hodson being told they can leave. We don't have much in terms of a youth system and under 23 side at the moment, so it's imperative that we get 2 in. I love 2 for each position myself, but I know moving forward we might have to work with a few that can play 1, 2, maybe even 3 different positions. But yeah, Hayden White might be one that we look at. Like I say, there's past history with Steve Evans in terms of him signing him before, and aside from last season, the Stags were challenging at the top of League Two. I think they got to the playoffs in 2018-19, and last season they dropped right off. But it'll be interesting to see how they go moving forward now that Graham Coughlin will get a full pre-season with his players. My final one is a player that's been with us before, been released by Colchester, 29 years old, 300 plus EFL games. Ryan Jackson had a really good spell at Colchester United after leaving us. Done really well in the first season with us in 15-16, in fairness to him. Remember that ridiculous Rory Delap-like throw-in that we were staggered when it suddenly came out in a home game, and played 45 times in 19-20 for the Essex team, and he kept 17 clean sheets. So you're looking at a clean sheet just under every 3 games, which is really, really good. As I've mentioned, he spent 2 years with us. Second campaign was hindered a little bit by injury and a loss of form, but we were really poor and only avoided relegation on the final day. But yeah, Ryan Jackson, in terms of geography, it's not too bad as well. Could be one that we could potentially have a look at. Still the good side of 30, so we'll see what happens. Right, we move from right back over to the other side. Left back, like I've already mentioned, there's a chance that Conor Ogilvie may have to be sold if the money's run out. I remember Mr. Scally spoke on Sky Sports shortly after lockdown in the middle of March and said that we've got 3 months without income that we can survive, and then we're not sure. We've had that and a bit more now, so I'm not sure what we're in terms of a financial state, but I'm sure Mr. Scally, Tom Lawrence and everyone else behind the scenes has been working wonders to keep us afloat. But my first choice, again, is an experienced left-back who has history with Steve Evans. His name's Colin Daniel, 32 years old, released by Burton at the end of the season. Was signed by Steve at Peterborough. Last season, he made 31 appearances at fullback for Burton, Nigel Clough's Burton, as it were then. And he kept 5 clean sheets. So not a brilliant return, but Burton were a bit up and down. Seemed to be one of them sides that go through a good spell and then they could go 3 or 4 or 5 without winning a game. Another one, vastly experienced, 300 plus career appearances. He's played over 100 times in League One, so he knows the division really well. And like I say, he was signed by Steve Evans in the summer of 2018, I think it was, when he was at London Road, and played quite a lot for Peterborough in that season, where again, they challenged for the playoffs. And then, dare I say it, did a posh, didn't quite make it, but you have to feel for them in terms of the way the 2019-20 seasons ended, in the fact that they had a great chance of getting into playoffs. They were in really good form and missed out on this points per game basis. And we all know Darren McCantley's very vocal on social media, but you can see his point, but it was always going to upset someone. But yeah, Colin Daniel was my first pick. Looking a bit further north is one who I kept an eye on from his Rochdale days. I thought he was really good when he was at Rochdale. Then he moved to Northampton. Since then, he's been injured and not really played a lot. Got released by Bolton at the end of the season. You might be thinking, oh my God, why do we want to get a defender in from Bolton? But I think Joe Bunning, 26 years old, could be a really good shout. And he made 8 appearances last season, unfortunately. He came in late. Remember, Bolton had to sign a load of people on deadline day, and obviously had a shocker of a season, but a lot of it, well, it wasn't their own doing. Obviously, they got themselves in a financial state, we know that, but there was rules in place that meant they couldn't sign people till really late in the window. They dropped into League Two. The manager's left. Maybe there's a chance to have a look. I think he's been offered a new deal, but, or no, I'm not sure. Don't hold that as gospel. But anyway, for me, I think it's a good option anyway. If we had the finances and the resources, scored 16 goals from fullback in his 5 years at Spotland under tutelage of mainly, I think it was Keith Hill, wasn't it? Like I say, then moved to Northampton. It didn't really work out. But if you look at the player he was at Rochdale, really good, really consistent, could defend, would get up and down. And at 26, still a decent age, probably approaching his prime years as a defender. So that's one. And the other one as well, obviously, I know Paul Rayner and Steve Evans have been quite vocal about potentially looking at bringing back those that were on loan last season. We're going to have to be clever in the loan market, we know that. Tom O'Connor, 21 years old at Southampton, 32 appearances on loan for us last season, fielded at fullback and also centre midfield, left side of a diamond. 12 clean sheets in a very good defensive Gillingham side. So that's my options at left back. We move into the middle now and talk about centre backs. Right, with all the talk of Max Amar potentially leaving to go to Bristol Rovers, The talk of Jack Tucker potentially having to be sold. Talk of Conor Ogilvie potentially having to be sold means that we could have invariably just Jack Bonham left from our back five last season, which is a little bit frustrating considering how good we were, but we don't know for sure. So let's have a look at some options that could be viable if we do need to bring them in. The first one is another Peterborough link, another Steve Evans link. 28-year-old Reece Bennett, been released by the Posh. Signed by Steve Evans in 2018, made 63 appearances in 2 seasons for the club at the top end of League One, 17 clean sheets in that time. So it's a clean sheet once every 3 or so games, which ain't too bad. He's played over 200 times in his career, so he's got good experience, but still a very good age for a centre-back, probably approaching what would be his best years. Clearly Steve rated him because he signed him. So for me, it seems that it has to be one. And I think, again, don't take this as gospel, I'm sure we were linked to him in January. I know a bid went in for someone from Peterborough, and the talk seemed to be that it was Reece Bennett. I'm not sure whether Darren McCantley confirmed that on his social media page, but it's one that's certainly worth looking at if we can afford him. The second one, you guessed it, used to play for Steve Evans. 30-year-old Christian Pearce. He's been released by Mansfield in League Two. He played under Steve at the Stags for at least 2 or 3 seasons, I think. And he's played nearly 400 times in his career, so he's got loads of experience, but still 30 for a centre-half. If he's looked after himself and doesn't suffer injuries, you could say he's probably got another 3-4 years at least. So he could be one looking at. He's averaged 43 appearances per season since the start of 2017-18, which is a really good return. It means you're not missing a lot of football. 34 clean sheets in that time, so it's 34 in 129. 25% clean sheet ratio, it's not too bad. Again, another player that, aside from last season, was in a team that was challenging right at the top end of League Two and only missed out on the playoffs a couple of seasons ago. So one to certainly keep an eye on, one that could be affordable. Keep your eyes peeled. That's all I can say. Like I say, I don't have any knowledge. It's just people that I've gone through lists of free agents and transfer market lists. Really good website if you want to check them out. Final one I've got is Jordan Moore-Taylor. He's been released by MK Dons. Hasn't played a lot of football, so a little bit of a risk, but I can only go on lists that I can find. 26 years old, so again, coming into his own in terms of experience. He's played over 200 times in the EFL. Was part of the MK Dons side that got promoted into League One, from League Two in 2018-19. Previously spent a lot of time at Exeter, who I've already mentioned, challenging at the top in the playoffs at Wembley, plenty of time. So got good experience of big games at this level. Like I say, I think he's probably had a couple of injuries. He's not played a great deal, but one to certainly keep an eye on if the finances work again. So, right, that's defence covered. Let's move further forward and look at this position. Central midfield. It's an area we're going to need to look at. Ollie Lee has gone back to Heart of Midlothian. We don't know what's happening with his contract situation. He's got a year to run, so that might not be viable. Mark Byrne, ACL recovery still ongoing. Been invited in for pre-season, whenever that is. Might not earn a contract. Stuart O'Keefe, probably our only natural holding midfielder. Alfie Jones gone back to Southampton. And Matty Willett coming back from an injury. And of course, the breaking news today, that Regan Charles Cook has left and joined Scottish Premier League outfit Ross County. So we wish Regan all the best. But my first name is Callum Camps, player that I've admired in a struggling Rochdale side for a few years now. Still only 24, which I found unbelievable. I thought he was older than that, to be fair. So a really good age. Played 28 times in League One last season, 6 goals and 7 assists. Can play as an orthodox centre mid or can play as a number 10. So versatility could be key, as I've already mentioned, as we're probably going to have to run with a small squad. Been at Rochdale all his career, so it'd be a big change for him, but maybe it's a change that he needs. He has been released. He's played over 200 times, like I say, still only 24. Versatile, 2 good feet, good engine from what I've seen when he's played against us. And yeah, it's a position I think we need. Like I say, Ollie Lee's gone, Regan Charles Cook's gone. They're the 2 you'd probably say were the CAM, the number 10 that we had last season. So it's a role that needs filling. So that might be one to look at. financially, can't see the fact that I'm not sure Rochdale would be paying a great deal more or similar to what we could offer. But he might have other options, you know that. Next one, another Peterborough link, surprise, surprise. Alex Woodyard, 27, Gravesend born, so knows the area. Played, I think, for Dartford in non-league before making his way into the Football League. And was signed by Steve Evans again, so there's another link there. 81 appearances in League One in the last 2 seasons. So 40 games a season, you can't complain with that. Again, indicates that he's not missing a lot of games due to injury and or suspension. Another one that looks like he could bring versatility. Traditional centre midfielder, could play from the side of a diamond if that's the way we go. So certainly one I think we need to look at, and at 27, still a really good age for a midfielder. Another one is a player that's been relegated out of this division. Played in a horrendous side last season. You can't make any bones about that or try and sugarcoat it, dress it up. It's Sam Manton, but I'm thinking at 28 years old, still got plenty to offer. He's played in a really poor Southend side for the last couple of seasons, which is unfortunate for them, unfortunate for him. But I remember him when he was at Walsall a few seasons ago, when they were challenging at the top end of League One with us in 15-16. Unfortunately, we both fell away, but played in a really good Walsall side then when they had the likes of Tom Bradshaw. I think they had Rico Henry at left back. Wayne Etheridge was their goalkeeper. I think he went on to Cardiff. They had a really, really good side. I think Adam Chambers was like the ageless centre midfielder, big bald head, massive beard, used to just keep it all day long. They had a really good team back then. I think Romain Sawyers might have been part of that side as well. And yeah, played over 200 times in his career, Sam. Can play further forward, can drop in a bit as well. So it's another one that fills the criteria of running with a smaller squad and needing versatility. Yeah, career's probably stalled somewhat, and that's through no fault of his own. They've just had horrendous problems behind the scene, haven't they, at Roots Hall, and they're going to have to rebuild in League Two. But Sam Manton might be one that we could look at geographically. It's local to us, it's just around the water. So yeah, and the final one is someone I've already mentioned, Alfie Jones, who played 35 times on loan for us last season, scored a couple of goals, was really, really good. I think he might go higher if Southampton let him out on loan again, but maybe Steve and Paul Rayner can work their magic. So, right, that's centre midfield. We now move out to the wider areas of the pitch. Wide attack. I've looked at a couple. I know it's something traditionally we've not played a great deal of. I know we went 4-4-2 back end of the season when we were trying to be more positive, be more proactive, because we needed to win games to bridge the gap to the playoffs before everything was sadly stopped. But there's a couple, again, one, unsurprisingly, is a link to Steve Evans. It's Joe Ward. If you remember him, scored an absolute banger at Priestfield in September 2019 against us in Peterborough's 2-1 win. Mika Mandron's goal came too late. We couldn't force an equaliser, but he's 24 years of age. Like I say, he's already played under Steve Evans. 88 appearances since joining from Woking in 2018. So one of them that Peterborough source from non-league, them rough diamonds that they get in and polish them up, and they do it really well. I mean, you can say a lot of things about Peterborough and Durham McCantley, but they are really good at finding talent in non-league, and Joe Ward's just another in a long list of them. Scored 10 goals in them 88 appearances in 2 seasons, so he knows where the back of the net is from a wide area. Whether we go down the route of playing naturally wide players, I'm not sure, but if we do, it'd be ideal to have 1 or 2 in the group. So Joe could be one. Another one is a bit left field. He's hardly played. He's 24 years old. He's been released by Doncaster, and that's Alex Kiwomya. Son of Chris, I do believe, ex-Ipswich striker. Plays from either side. I'm sure he was highly rated as a kid, and he's had horrendous injury problems. But still only 24, like I say. Had a good season for Crewe in 2016-17 in League Two. And we know Crewe like to play good football. They like to get it down on the deck, play in between the lines. So in that sense, he knows how to play football the right way. He played 39 times that season and scored 7 goals. Since then, like I say, he's hardly kicked a ball in anger. But might be an interesting one. Might want a fresh start away from Doncaster. So we can see what happens with that one. You can shoot me down if you want, Jules fans. It's not a problem. The other 2 are familiar faces again, and it follows the returning loan style theme. So Jordan Graham has been released by Wolves, only 25 years old. We know how highly rated he was as a kid before he picked up a knee injury. We saw him all too briefly at the back end of the season, mainly from the bench. Delicious cross for Conor Ogilvy's winner at Southend back in February was a prime example of what he can do. He can beat a fullback and stand up across. So be interesting to see what offers he has. Steve Evans has spoken about him, says he likes him, and he's also spoken about another Jordan, and that's Roberts, 26-year-old released from Ipswich. Scored twice in 10 games for us last season before everything came to an early end. Can play from the side, can play as an orthodox striker in a pair. Imagine he could do on his own. He's big, he's strong, he can run in behind, he's got enough pace about him. Be nice if we could get him in. Right, final area now is the most important on the pitch, you might say. Goals win your games, but I won't lie, finding out-of-contract strikers that fit the bill was tough. We've had to delve into League Two a little bit. So we'll start with the big man who was managed by former Gills player Michael Flynn, and that is 30-year-old striker from Newport, Jamil Matt, has been released. 26 goals in 97 appearances since the start of 18-19. So just under 1 in 4. But I think sort of like a John Akindi. He's not going to score you loads and loads, but he'll bring others into play. He's a big lump. He can hold it up. Again, though, he can run in behind. He can work the channel. He's a big, robust centre forward. Played a huge part, I think, in Newport's recent cup runs. Absolutely terrified those defenders coming to visit from the Premier League who like to play on a carpet and don't like being roughed up. So could be an interesting one. Like I say, be a challenge for him at 30, stepping up a league, but I'm sure it'd be a challenge he'd like to test himself higher up the football pyramid. It might not happen, but it's one that I found, one that could fit the bill, especially if Mika Mandron doesn't sign on the dotted line and moves on. He could come in as somewhat of a direct replacement for Mika. Another one is Paul Mullen from Tranmere, 25 years old, plays as more of a second striker rather than an out-and-out number 9. Creative, has 50 career goals in around 250 games. Did well in the Tranmere side that got promoted into League One a couple of seasons back. Has played plenty this season for them as well. Like Peterborough, we have to mention them and say we do feel sorry for the Tranmere fans. And is it Mark and Nicola Palios who run the club? And again, Nicola's very vocal on social media. We can understand the frustrations. They've been relegated on points per game, and they were on a decent run before everything got stopped. But at the same time, they were horrendous before that, and there had to be one way to stop the season, and that was the chosen way, unfortunately. But Paul Mullen's an option, like I say, not prolific, but a different type of striker again. Could come in and link play, be creative. So for any type of fox in the box that we could get in. The final one I've mentioned is probably a little bit ambitious. His season's still going on. He played the last 2 games for Blackburn. It's Dominic Samuel. We were linked, I think, very loosely in January, but nothing ever happened. I think Steve Evans said there was never any real sort of interest, but he admired him. But he's out of contract when the season does end for Blackburn. I'd imagine finances are probably a little bit out of our league at the moment, especially in the current climate. But you never know. Been playing as a wide attacker as well a little bit for Blackburn at the moment, which is interesting, but predominantly plays as a centre forward. Had a decent loan spell with us a few seasons ago under the late Justin Edinburgh. We know what he's all about. 26, a really good age. But I'd imagine that's probably my fantasy signing, if you want to call it that. Right, that is my lists. Agree with them, disagree with them, discuss them. That's the idea of it. It's just nice to be talking about football. We are a lot closer to coming out of this, I think, than we have been. But we still have to keep being careful, being alert, washing our hands, singing happy birthday and all that sort of stuff. Keep an eye out for the podcast. Jules and the Blood Injury Time are recording on Friday, reviewing the 2019 season, Steve Evans' first year in charge. So that'll be an interesting listen with the boys, Stocky and Boz. I'm sure there'll be a little bit of banter towards Boris. Keep staying safe. Look after yourselves. We're back soon. Until next time, up the Gills.